And it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on podcastufo.com. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we are live from a secret mountaintop in Maine. Well, sounds good anyway. And we have an interesting guest this evening, Ron Regehr, and he has been a UFO researcher for more than 50 years and is a retired aerospace engineer from Douglas Aircraft and Aerojet. Well, before we get to him, we're going to be talking to Alejandro Rojas with the news in just a minute. But I want to thank all the listeners that support the show. And if you can't support the show, we still appreciate you. And if you'd like to listen for free, you can every Wednesday evening at 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that is right here on podcastufo.com. You can also jump into the chat room there and ask our guests some questions every week. And we're also live on PSN Radio now, and there's an active Skype chat room on that as well. Don't forget, we run the full show as a podcast every Thursday at 10 to midnight Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Digital Network. Alejandro, how are you?
I am good. How are you, my friend?
Good, and I'm kind of excited. I have next week, I have an important guest, and that's you. We're going to do a whole darn show together. Did you know
really?
That? You forgot.
No, I do remember because I advertised it on my show.
That's right. So you're, you did. Oh, okay. Yeah. So you are committed.
I'm committed. I told the world that it's going to happen, and I am a man of my word.
Good to hear. I knew that anyway.
So I'll be there. Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about with on the show?
You know, I think we'll probably have a game plan before that time.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. We'll figure something out.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Well, so what's going on with the news this week?
There's UFOs all over the place. And there's fake UFOs all over the place. So I guess I'll just to start off real quick, there's a lot of fakes out there. I've said this before that we're kind of in the age of the UK tabloids, because now when you look for news, you know, there's the UK tabloids have stories every day. Now they're all jumping on this UFO bandwagon, and they're jumping on the fake UFO bandwagon. So Secure Team 10, there's a new one called Section 51. There's also this crappy news website that calls itself the Science World Report that is jumping in on this as well. And they're posting all of these fake UFO videos. These are all fake, people. So Science World Report, if it comes from them or from these tabloids, just disregard them. So some of you might be following the Open Minds headlines. We post every day the news headlines. You'll notice we haven't been covering those. But we've been covering other stories because there are interesting stories out there.
Yeah. No, that's good. You know, it's too bad there's no, like, real watchdog for this type of thing, but what can you do? You know, I mean, they're probably reporting other paranormal things that aren't so as well, if it's, you know. Are you aware of that, or?
Are the UK people?
Yeah. Or is it just UFOs?
Mostly UFOs, sometimes some other things. There are some ghost videos or Bigfoot videos. There was actually a Bigfoot video of caught by a drone, allegedly, recently in Utah. And it was kind of funny. It turned out to be a hoax. And the guys got in these silly costumes and were teasing people with this video that they released, showing how they were just tricking everyone. But so that's kind of funny because a lot of people are using, you know, the paranormal and the popularity of paranormal, not just to get hits like the tabloids, but also for marketing purposes, because they know people like these tabloids will run with it. And then, unfortunately, some of those stories are getting picked up by mainstream media. And then they get a bunch of attention and a lot of hits. And it's a great marketing tool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not much you can do about it. Just stay
what
clear.
Can you do? Yeah.
Is this what we call the awkward...
Yeah.
So,
well, I was just waiting for you to take the lead.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's actually happening that's real this week?
So what's happening that's real UFOs. So we have a gentleman, Charles Lamoureux from Vancouver, who is a UFO hunter. So he's out looking for UFOs frequently, and he lives kind of in the downtown Vancouver area, and he's got a lot of equipment. He does this with cameras and such. And one of these cameras is a low-lux kind of night vision camera. He's got a regular camera. He's got a thermal black and white camera, so it detects heat, and these heat signatures are different colors. Well, on June 3rd, just recently, he caught something interesting that he sent over to us, and it's an orange orb, and he captures this on his night vision, which captures color. And you see this orb cruising across the sky. Then it goes in front of these buildings there in Vancouver, and it does make a turn at one point. And you can tell from the star field that you can see in the background. And it definitely looks like an orb, so it's really interesting. He also shows that this object cannot be seen on the thermal. That just means that it's either the same temperature as the air around it or cooler, like he notes. And the other thing is that he couldn't see it with his eyes. So kind of an interesting video. I think the movement of this thing's really weird, kind of cool. Yeah. Now, I talked to Mark D'Antonio, MUFON's photo and video analyst, and asked him what he thought. And he said it could be trash blowing in the air. I caught a video that was somewhat similar, and you can see this one in the story as well, in Las Vegas. This was sent to me by some people who went on vacation in Vegas, and they sent me the video and let me post it. And this was years ago, probably 8 years ago, something like that. And you can see this thing kind of floating around, really weird. I think the video is still kind of strange. Mark is pretty convinced that was trash. And I can see that a little more because it does look like it's doing weird kind of things. But this object that Charles got is kind of moving steadily along and makes this curved turn. So my video guy here, Michael Klein, he also feels that it's probably some sort of trash floating in the air. But either way, it's a really neat video, and I think Charles makes some good points that it's not trash, just in the way that it moves and everything. So I think this one's somewhat, at least, still mysterious, but it's a real great video, and Charles is a great guy, so this is a good one.
Now, when you take like an object you look at through that night vision, and it turns a certain color, can you work backwards to see what color it really would be?
Well, the device that he uses is called a low-lux device. So it's not necessarily like your traditional night vision like the military uses. It captures full color, and it's more of just like a special sort of lens that can catch really low light. And it can also capture infrared light. So it just kind of has a wider spectrum. So it's real color. So what you see with this camera is real color. Oh. And what's funny about this camera is that we've written a couple stories on UFO videos captured with this camera. And now when you go to the website for this camera, they have listed some of these videos, really? Including some of our stories on there, which is kind of funny because that's the only thing they have on there. So it must be popular for that purpose. But yeah, so that is, it should be the real color of that it's receiving. Now, if it's a reflection, it could be a reflection of IR light. And Mark D'Antonio mentioned that because Charles feels the object's probably within 100 feet. Mark felt that was probably true. So Mark thought, well, it could be reflecting IR light from the camera because the camera has the ability to throw out, the IR light that can't be seen with your eyes. And so it could be reflecting that. However, Charles says he had his IR off. So it wasn't that. But it is kind of a reddish color. If you've seen, like, for instance, if you have an older camera, lots of older cameras can catch IR. So if you take your remote control, which uses IR light, and face it at your older video camera and push the buttons, you'll see the IR light on your remote control coming out of the end, whereas you can't see that with your eye. And when you do that, the light's typically a reddish kind of color. So that's one possibility they've thought of, but Charles is pretty sure that that's not it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, what else is happening?
Yeah, some other interesting ones. I know this is one that you thought was pretty interesting, and it is. This is somebody in Indiana. Now, this is a picture that was actually taken on March 2nd in 2015, but only recently submitted to MUFON. And so this story was written by Roger Marsh of MUFON. And this person says it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and they were driving around. For some reason, they kept driving around at night. They don't say why. But when they passed this field, they saw these 3 orbs above this field. They thought it was kind of neat and kept moving on. They came back later and saw the lights. So this time they stopped and looked and thought, oh, that's cool. And it was something like the 3rd time they came by that they finally decided to take a picture. And they said that every time they came by, it was for like a 45-minute period, these lights were sitting there. And which is kind of weird that they would leave and come back and leave and come back that so early in the morning. But still, the images are really interesting, or the image, because you do see these 3 round lights floating in the sky, just floating there in a triangular formation. Of course, any 3 lights would be that way. And you can see they don't appear to be a solid object because it looks like you can see a contrail in between them, behind them.
Right.
And so, yeah, this is a really weird photo. MUFON did look at this. The investigator, Patrick O'Brien, did close it as an unknown. So, yeah, you've seen this picture. Kind of weird, huh?
Yeah, it's actually really good. The orbs or lights or whatever they are seem like they're perfectly round and very uniform. And so is the triangle formation. Looks very uniform as well. Of course, that triangle from any angle can look different. But I think it's a really great pictures, really. Yeah,
really weird. Kind of a strange one.
And anyone can see that if they just jump on. In the show notes, there's a link to openminds.tv. Everything's right there.
Yeah, and the last one I wanted to talk about really quick was a pilot who says he got in a dogfight with a sphere UFO. So this pilot essentially says he was flying along and he found that he saw this object. He said he was like at 1,000 feet, seems low. But he was flying by and he was going this object passed by going the opposite direction. He said it was 300 feet off of his left wing, and it looked like a metallic orb that was reflecting light, and it was about the size of a basketball. He said he then turned to try to catch up to this thing to go check it out. But he said it turned also. So when he kept maneuvering to try to fly over by this thing to check it out, he says it also was trying to keep behind him. And that's why he said, he even used his term, that it felt like they became engaged in a 2-turn dogfight, is what he called it. But after the second turn, he said the object kind of broke away and went straight off to the south of him, and then he lost sight of it. He said that this is the second time this has happened to him, and the last time this happened was in 1978.
Wow.
Yeah, so this was over San Bernardino County in California. But yeah, that's another pretty interesting. That's another MUFON report.
Now, it sounds similar to some of the Foo Fighters during World War II.
It does. It does. It sounds similar to Foo Fighters, and it sounds kind of weird. But metallic spheres are reported fairly frequently, and craft that seems to be maneuvering out to stay away from other aircraft is also something that's reported by pilots fairly frequently. Certainly, you've got dozens of cases from credible pilots that say this sort of thing has happened. So who knows? I guess it's a possibility, but this is just another one to add to the list. Pretty strange.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks a lot, Alejandro, and it'll be great to have you here next week.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Now I'm going to set the stage a little for the upcoming guest, Ron Regehr. He is sitting outside on his porch on his cell phone because of two very loud parrots, and that's how we're going to do the show. Did you have to deal with that, Alejandro, when you...
I did, and I think if I remember correctly, last time I interviewed him, I've known Ron for like a decade, if not longer, but I think the last time I interviewed him, the parrots did get a little feisty and made themselves known in the background.
All right. Okay, everyone, so hang in there for the quick music break. We'll be right back with Ron Regehr. Ron Regir, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Glad to have you on the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I've heard your name over the years a number of times, and you have quite an extensive background. Let's talk about that first, and then I want to find out what captured your imagination and got you interested in UFOs. But can you basically, for the person that's unaware of your background, can you basically tell them your satellite and aerospace engineer background?
Sure. I got started interested in UFOs back in, long time ago, like in the 50s when they had all those horrible Class D movies.
Oh, yeah.
The Invasion for Space. Remember, every Saturday I'd hock a Coke bottle or a 7-Up bottle or a Roman meal bread wrapper. That was all we needed to get into a matinee movie on Saturday. And I'd see one of these B movies, and I knew they were phony, but they were so cool. And it was just a lot of fun. And that kind of piqued my interest, and that was about the same time Major Kehoe, Don Kehoe, came out and was talking about UFOs. And we had one of the few televisions in the neighborhood, and we'd have people gather around the TV. That time, television came on sometime in the morning. We had 2 and sometimes 3 channels. It went off the air at 10 o'clock at night. Black and white, of course. We wouldn't even sit around and watch a test pattern. But one of the shows was a news show. I'm not remembering who the host was, but they were interviewing this, I think he was a Marine Major, Don Kehoe, and he was talking about UFOs. And I was fascinated by it because here was confirmation that maybe these might be cheesy movies, but at least there was some basis for them to be on the air or in theater. So that kind of got me started on the whole thing. And then when the Russians launched Sputnik, then and there I decided I would become an aeronautical engineer so I could figure out ways to beat those dirty commies. And at the same time solve the mystery of UFOs, because since I had been convinced by then that they were real and they could have all these flight characteristics, how do they do that? That was the question that kind of drove me. So I went to school, got my degree in aeronautical engineering, and went to work for Douglas Aircraft and hired on as part of the Saturn Apollo team. This is back in 63. And I was assigned as a electrical engineering department. That was the only department opening they had at the time, so I was responsible for outlaying the interface, all the electrical component switches between the upper stages and the lower stages of the Saturn Apollo moon rocket. Then I was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time to hear about this new and exciting project called Skylab, but we called it the Orbital Workshop. Most of your listeners are probably too young to realize that in the early 60s, we had a lot of failures. Our rockets would go up and explode, and it was disastrous. So we planned, I think it was 19 different moon launches, figuring that about half of them would crash. So the astronauts were really brave. They were real heroes. They were brave. They were. They knew that that a lot of these things crashed, and we had escape modules built into them where if the firing officer was to see that something was going amiss, he could push the button and launch the crew capsule off of the main rocket. But that was sketchy. So anyway, I worked on the Orbital Workshop for Skylab, and then I transferred over to Douglas Aircraft Division and worked on some intelligence gathering aircraft. We call them spy planes, but they're just gathering intelligence. And that program was awarded to Boeing. So I was all of a sudden out of a job. The way they worked at Aerospace at that time was when they canceled the program, everybody on the program got laid off immediately and sent home, and then they would rehire the ones they wanted to come back.
Really? Wow.
Well, I was somewhat devastated, so I called a friend of mine, and he said, no, we don't have any openings back here at Douglas Huntington Beach. That was the Space Division. And while I was on the phone to him, I got a call from this little company named Aerojet. He says, Ron, we've been looking at you and want you to come up here and work for us. So I started working there, and there I worked on, spent 31 years on advanced observation platforms, or spy satellites and various sensing systems that would be able to detect better than the human eye or human senses could detect. Then that's where I ended my career and retired and went to run a campground and mobile home park, continued my UFO research, and started looking into very ancient UFO events. What was it? Were there any of those? And so I lived in an area at that time where there were a lot of petroglyphs and pictographs. Petroglyphs are where the rock is incised. Pictographs are where there's a pigment or paint applied to the surface of the rock. And lo and behold, I started seeing what looked to me to be flying orbs or flying saucers. And I talked to some of my native friends, and most of them were very quiet, either didn't know or claimed not to know. And then I met a youth elder, and he was quite blunt about it. He said, yes, those are the star people. They come down in their ships, and They have been coming here for a long time. And when they speak about a long time, they're talking about usually prehistoric times. So that started a new realm of investigation. So I was state director of MUFON for MUFON Utah for several years, and then I was asked to rewrite their field investigators manual, and I rewrote that and brought it up to the 21st century. It's now available electronically as well as on hard copy, and wrote 23 operating procedures on using different items of equipment and different techniques to be used in investigating UFOs. And that brings us up to current.
Wow, that's something. I've said a number of times in the show that it really doesn't matter if it's ancient or now. You know, I mean, as far as different stages of development of intelligence out there, it could be at any point in our development that these things could be showing up. You know, as an example about time and development, the 4.53 billion years that Earth has been here, as far as we know. Mark D'Antonio, he's been on this show a number of times. He's the MUFON photo analyst. But I was at a talk where he displayed something that he did when he was teaching classes, and it's pretty amazing, and it just gives you a scope. And that is, he had a roll of toilet paper. Now, it was reinforced, and what he did with it, it was 350 feet long, which is 4,222 inches or something like that. So he says, okay, this 350-foot roll of toilet paper is the existence of Earth. And then down the line, he would have this many feet out, it's the first known life, or, you know, all the way. And when it comes to humans being existing, or let's just say Homo erectus, which is the nearest, well, the oldest fossil of Homo erectus is 1.9 million years old. So that whole roll of toilet paper, the 4,222 inches, I believe it is, Homo erectus is only just over a half an inch at the end. So that's amazing. It will give you a scope of time. We can't figure out time. For the human brain, you can't understand how much time that is. But when you have it laid out like that, you can see. So they could have been visiting Earth, you know, way before Homo erectus was here. You know, who knows? That's all fascinating to me.
Yeah, some of the glyphs I found, I sent you photos of them that I took, and then I believe you posted them on your page, are 5,000 to 6,000 years old. And they show these flying orbs. And there's a couple of pictures of what looks like the prototypical alien gray. And it just, these things are amazing that they are there. And anthropologists and archaeologists both disciplines have a difficult time explaining them. It's kind of fun listening to them, but actually. But then talking with the, Hopi and Zuni elders, and I find that, no, they're commonplace. These things appear all the time. Oh, I got it.
You okay?
Yeah, I just had a dry throat out here. I had to get a sip of water.
If you want to take a quick break?
Let's take a quick break.
Yeah. Okay. So, just to let, if someone wants to make a quick call in, you're welcome to. And the phone number here is 603-967-4030. If anyone wants to call in and you want to talk about a sighting that you had or anything like that, we're letting Ron take a little break here. So again, that number is 603-967-4030. Are you back?
Yeah. Yes.
You need to go in and get a glass of water, Ron?
Yeah. could you go to commercial or something? I'll be back in less than a minute.
Okay, that's fine. We don't have any commercials on this show, but that's okay. Again, if anyone wants to call in, and it's too bad I didn't save that long-winded rant that I just did about the Earth age for right now while he's gone. But if you are listening live or actually as a podcast later on, and you want to check out the show notes to this, if you go to the end of Ron's bio down at the bottom, you'll see 3 pictures of the glyphs that he was talking about. A couple of them you can make out easily, and some of them not so easily. But it is kind of curious. A lot of the figures that the Native Americans drew do have a similarity to what we think of as possible extraterrestrial. And that is something that has fascinated me a long time, is what the Native Americans call star people. And the Hopi Indians are another group that they have Kachina dolls and that are just really almost alien-like. Are you back?
I'm back. Thank you for that break. I apologize to you and to your audience. I'll talk real fast to make up for it. How's that?
Not at all. No need to worry.
You were mentioning Kachinas, and Kachinas, they are the star people. They have representatives from different galaxies. There's a galaxy clan, and both Hopis, all the Pueblo people. And the Kachinas come down every year to San Francisco Peaks. Those peaks, mountains that are just north and a little bit west of Flagstaff, Arizona. From there, they go to Zuni, which is in extreme western edge of New Mexico, just below I-40. And then after appearing in Zuni, they then go to the different Pueblos. And these star people are acknowledged in their religious carvings and in their dances. And this weekend is we're coming up on the solstice on the 21st, and they will be in ceremony for the day before, during, and the day after. So we're getting into high seasons for that now. But the Kachinas are represented in some of the paintings as well, the pictographs. And the star people are also represented. There's one set of 19 different images that are close to life-size, the Sago Canyon pictographs. And those are about 6,000 years old. And if you look carefully, you can see the spears or orbs flying off, leaving the watchers behind. Those watchers are there to keep Skinwalker. Remember the Skinwalker Ranch?
Oh, yeah.
Owned by Big Old. If we go up the canyon from Sago Canyon and through the Ute Reservation, the road goes up through, you pass through a gate. It's locked unless you're Ute. And down the other side, you come to the Skinwalker Ranch. And that Skinwalker, that evil spirit, that witch, depending on which story you wish to accept, but it's a malevolent force, irrespective of which one, is at the other end of the canyon. So those 19 figures are there for the sole purpose of warning people, don't go up this canyon, and to use their power to keep the evil, malevolent being in the canyon. And another glyph that's there, I did not send you, is a glyph of, and there's no reason other than just didn't cross my mind at the time, is there's a witch that's being constrained by the spiritual force of a medicine man. It's a fascinating set of glyphs all in that one little area.
I've actually seen some in California. I was just totally amazed up on top of. It wasn't really even a mountain. It was just up in the hills. And it's the one thing that puzzles me is how can they date these things? You know, scientifically, maybe the pigments or something?
Yeah, if we're talking petroglyphs, that's where the rock is in size.
Mm-hmm.
There they can get a crude approximation based upon how much of the repatination. Let me back off. I think most people have been in the desert or mountainous terrain that see a lot of rocks. Many of those rocks have a coating on them, oxidation coating, mineral coatings from different devices. In the West, on the sandstone, we get a black called desert varnish. It's a mixture of titanium and different metals that are leached out and deposit on the surface and harden. When that black varnish is abraded away either by percussive hitting with a rock or scraping with a harder rock, then it reveals the lighter surfaced rock underneath. Well, then the process of repatination or redepositing whatever this film was, this blackness is, goes back and is redeposited because the system, it's a natural system, it doesn't stop. And so by determining the thickness of the patina that's deposited from the time they were inside to the time they measured, they can get a rough approximation. The other thing they do is do digs around the sites, where there's petroglyphs, and see if they can find different artifacts that would enable them to get a more accurate dating. And that's quite common.
Yeah.
Because these things, it's not graffiti. These were well thought out, well planned, and took a while to construct. So with the pictographs, there's a pigment deposit on them. And the pigments are, for the most part of life. They're plant matter, blood, different organic materials, and those have a life that they can measure with a lot more accuracy. Carbon-14 dating is one of them. And so they can get fairly close with that. But again, they have certain characteristics in the artist's work that they can say, well, this is this time period because of all there's literally thousands of these panels. And they tell stories of the migration. They tell stories of stay away from here, there's floods. They tell stories of you could find water up this canyon. They have different petroglyphs and pictographs that depict the supernova of 1054. There's one of that in Chaco Canyon. Yeah, there's petroglyphs and pictographs that talk about the moon phases. There's some that talk about all manner of archaeoastrology, the use of ancient techniques to determine astronomy positions. There's moon phases. There's fascinating series that at Deir Chaco at Bahada Butte where they have stone dagger, two large rocks that we could not move today without extremely heavy equipment. These rocks were positioned very carefully so as at the solstice and the light would come down between these two rocks, and a dagger of light would traverse across a spiral. And that would, at noon on the solstice, this dagger would precisely bisect the spiral. Amazing piece of work.
Wow.
Up at Pitcha Canyon near Moab, there's a rattlesnake, about a 10 or 12 foot rattlesnake, petroglyph incised in the rock. Beautiful, anatomically correct, a beautiful snake. But at noon on the solstice, an arrowhead comes down and pierces the skull of this rattlesnake. It's just so cool. It's just like whoever thought of that and was able to execute it. And can you imagine the patience it took to sit there and say, okay, let's move this rock over here, and at noon on the solstice, we'll see what happens if we can move this. Okay, over a period of, you have to be there several years to get everything positioned just right, and then, have Mikey come out with his chisel and carve it real quick. So, fascinating stuff. I sent you one group of 3 pictures. Remember that one? It's captured, fleeing, captured, and returned, I think, the captions on them. Interesting story. Did you get those?
I'm not sure. I have 3 pictures. I don't know if you sent them to the same email address, but anyway, there are 3. I was just mentioning while we're on break here that if anyone wanted to see them, they're down, but in the show notes. But I'm sorry, all I have is 3. I can add some more later. But go ahead and talk about.
I went to a different computer and I might have used a different email address for you. One was
I see.
the producer, and I forget what the other one was. But,
okay.
They may be in a different inbox. But there's a big rock. Oh, let me give you the backstory of this. I think it's interesting. I had a reputation of being the UFO guy, and a gentleman came up to me one day, and he looked at me, and I said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "You're the UFO guy, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You got to go down to the goosenecks. You got to go down there. There's this huge rock. It's got 4-foot tall alien on it." I got my attention. So I quizzed him a little bit, and he gave me some rough directions. He said, "You go down there to the road to goosenecks, and turn right on a dirt road, go for about a mile. There's a huge boulder all by itself, and you can't miss it. It's got these 4-foot tall aliens on it." Whenever I hear the term "can't miss it," that's the kiss of death for me. But anyway, the other thing, if you have listeners out here in the West, they'll acknowledge it, and not so much back east, but we've got hundreds of dirt roads out here. Most of the area, if you were to get a sheet of glass and drop it about a foot onto the concrete, the cracks would be about like the dirt roads. They just proliferate. And so the odds of finding the right road were fairly remote, but I did find it. But 1 mile in, all I've got is low scrub, absolutely no rocks at all to be seen. I checked every rock of any significant size for 7 miles going up this canyon. I finally found this boulder. Fortunately, it was right next to the road. I mean, you could roll down the passenger car window and touch it. That's how close it was. Mm-hmm. But it's about 8 foot to 9 foot, almost cube in shape. And on the front of this boulder, there are 3 petroglyphs panels on it. The first panel shows a UFO, which is in Hopi, a flying shield or papilota. It's a oval with an arrow at the bottom, stylized. And then there's a man with his ears down, which means he's not really paying attention, because when you're paying attention, your ears are up. Then there's some birds flying, and then there's deer footprints with the dew claws showing. So that means he was fearful and running from this UFO. So and there's a natural hole in the rock there. So it's that was the first panel. Then slightly above that one and to the left is a panel of a flying serpent, and he's captured this guy that's got his ears down, his arms hanging, his shoulders sagging. He's got no feet, so he can't run. He's got no hands, so he can't fight. And he's on a bird, standing on a bird, and the bird's not flying, which means he can't flee. The birds always fly when they're trying to get away from something. So, and there's a mountain lion footprint there. So he's part of the mountain lion clan, and he's been taken by this flying reptile. Then the next panel shows a big descending spiral, but the end is closed off. And there's a snake blocking the end of it. So it says he's been trying to get down. He was stopped by a serpent. And then there's another spiral, descending spiral, and it's open-ended, and there he is coming down with the help of a spirit person. So all these fleeing, captured, and returned by a spirit person all on one rock, I thought was a beautiful depiction right there.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I went back and told John, I said, John, it's 7 miles, not one. There's no aliens there. There's a flying serpent. And they're about 3 inches tall, 4 inches tall, instead of 4 foot.
Either he was doing, I'm trying to remember that desert. Yeah.
Coyote.
Yeah.
Or he admitted to having since 420.
I was thinking that it was either that or you found the wrong rock. Now, we're only about 15 minutes away from the top of the hour, and I'm going to change gears a little bit here. We can talk about the ancient connection again later on in the second hour, but I want to get back to satellites because we had a couple of questions sent to us. And I don't know if the listener is a subscriber or just listens to the first part of the show. So I am, I'd like to keep talking about that later on because I think it's fascinating. But with your involvement in the satellites, this question came in, and he is asking, I would like to know if you think there are monitoring systems pointing away from Earth out into space, specifically that could be part of a classified program such as Star Wars defense system that was rumored to be in development. That's one question.
Okay, let's see. I'll start off by my involvement with the satellites was I wrote the performance design specs. We're all part of a team. I mean, there's team members of about 6 or 8 prime engineers led by a team leader. I was not the team leader. I wrote the specs. I would tap everybody's brains and talk to the Air Force about what their requirements were and integrate their requirements with our capabilities and write the specifications. The reason we did that is you might have the idea, you could hire me to paint your house. Your concept of me painting your house is to have maybe 20 people with 1-inch brushes very carefully going over every inch of it, and I'm going to fly over it with one of these helicopters that has a 500-gallon bucket and drop it all at once. So both of them get your house painted, but remarkably different results. So what my job was to make sure that when you said you wanted the house painted, and I said I was going to paint the house, that we knew precisely what was going to happen, what all the requirements were, and how you could verify that we did it right. That was my job. Mm-hmm. Now then, the other thing was you asked about, is there a platform that looks into space? No, not directly. And the reason is our primary goal is to protect Earth and to protect the continental United States. So the spy satellites looked at the Earth disk, but they also look above the Earth disk because that's where potential overseas threats would come from. A ballistic missile would go up in the atmosphere and come back down. So we'd have to look to see if we see it coming over the atmosphere. So from that respect, we do see into deep space, but it's not aimed there per se. We're aimed at the Earth disk. Did that answer all those questions?
But let me just ask you this. I think I read somewhere where you talk about the fact that UFOs could possibly be caught on these spy satellites?
Absolutely. We did that. We got most of your readers will probably remember the Phoenix Light.
Oh, yeah.
We got that. Now, when I use the word track, that means something different the way our system works than what most people think of. So I'm going to say we tracked it, but that's not a continuous tracking the way you would if you're standing at on a mountaintop watching a truck go by in the distance, for example. Our satellite takes pictures. It's a scanning system, and it scans and then rescans and then rescans the entire Earth disk. And so then we would see things, and then using a moving target indicator, MTI, we could say, oh, this object has moved since the last time. Therefore, it's something of interest that we want to look at. Because stationary things, nobody cares about looking at them. If it's not moving, don't worry about it. So we look at moving things, and that was what would pique our interest. But we saw the Phoenix lights.
Wait, can you hold just 1 second? How often is a scan done?
That's classified, but it's frequently enough so we don't worry about it. Let's just put it that way. And the main reason is the data compression. There's a whole lot of information gathered. And if to look at it, imagine if you're blinking rapidly, you can still track something, but there's gaps in the tracking. So, but if you blink fast enough, the gaps don't really matter.
Yeah.
But so that's essentially what we're doing. And we tracked it from southern Nevada all the way aloft to south and east of Tucson.
Now, when this is being tracked, are you able to detect speed and size or anything like that?
Speed, yes. Size, no. Size is we're an infrared system, and size depends upon how much infrared the object is either reflecting or generating. Infrared is heat, so if it's a really hot thing, then it generates more heat than a really cold thing, but it might also be reflecting. So we can get relative intensities, and then with known sources, then we can say, oh, we know what this is because it has radiant intensity of so much. To give you an idea, you might have a flash bulb and a match that both have the same amount of energy, but the flash bulb expends its energy very quickly, let's say 1,000th a second, whereas a match has a bright flash and then burns slowly over a longer period of time. They both have the same energy, but they'll have different time intensity profiles. So you could say, oh, that's the way its time intensity profile shows us it's a match. Whereas, wow, look at that, that was a flash bulb. So that's the way then over a period of time, we can identify various targets based upon their time intensity profile. But this was a one-shot deal. We hadn't seen it before, so we couldn't do that quantitative measurement.
I see. Now, okay, so this happened. I'm trying to picture exactly how this all works. But let's just say you're monitoring, or someone's monitoring, or even a computer's monitoring, and this.
Yeah.
In this.
We started. Yeah, go ahead.
In this Phoenix Lights object, whatever it was, goes through starting in Nevada in the course that you tracked it. Who gets that information, and how is it not a big deal?
Well, it goes to several different commands. Space Command is the main one, located at Cheyenne Mountain. And the data goes directly to Space Command and several other users. And the list is classified. But just suffice it to say, if the people that need it get it, and the people that don't need it don't get it. And but what we used to have at the Air Force Station, a large plexiglass map of the world with a plexiglass, clear plexiglass, and on the plexiglass was a map of the world, just like the world, standard map. And then there was behind it there was an arm that would rotate that had a whole bunch of little peanut bolts in it. And whenever there was an object detected, the light would blink on, and an airman with a grease pencil would go up and put an X on the map. That doesn't provide a lot of accuracy. So we later on refined that and as computers became more capable, we wrote computer programs that would enable us to do all of this electronically. But gosh, remember the old science fiction shows where they had the reels of tape that were 18 inches diameter that be spinning in the background?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we used those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One tape would be 15 minutes of data. And we're running 24/7. So you can imagine how many tapes we would use there. And we can't use the whole tape because we have to reload and load. So we run a tape. We run 3 tapes so we can always make sure there's no gaps in the coverage. Each tape, 15-minute tape, gives us about 6-inch thick stack of the 8.5 by 14 paper, printer paper. Now, the printers are going crazy when we're doing this. So this is going on all the time, 24/7, 365, and it's a fascinating thing to watch. You realize we can't always print this, so we have another electronic program that looks at these data electronically and sorts out. It's sort of like when you're busy working, you can sort out. You say, okay, I'm going to listen for my wife and my girlfriend's voice. I'm not going to listen for the telephone. I'll just hear it, but it won't register. I won't pay any attention to the cat that's scratching or any of these other things. And so that's what our software does. It listens to what it's supposed to listen for and doesn't listen for anything else. It still keeps it, but it doesn't report it. And then when something happens that's of significance, then it triggers an alert, and we get an instant report on it.
Now, how long ago was this, as far as that technology?
Oh, it's still going on. It started, the grease pencil was in the early 60s to mid-70s, early 80s, and then it's an evolutionary process, and we've continued to evolve the process. Mm-hmm. As computers get faster and more capable, obviously we are able to do more processing.
Now, how were you privy to know about the Phoenix Lights, that incident?
I wrote what is called a 60-day report. That was every 60 days we send a full report of everything that's happened to the U.S. Air Force. And so I wrote the 60-day report, and I got all the reports, and that was one of them. There was another one of an object that came from deep space, crossed in front of our star sensor, made a 90-degree turn, appeared in front of our primary sensor in a stately fashion at about 12,000 miles an hour, which is below escape velocity, just went off into space as a powered craft. So we knew that wasn't a meteor, it wasn't a meteorite, it was an unknown. Another object we saw was the Iranian UFO that was over Iran in 1976.
Wow.
We detected that. So, yeah, we had a pretty good record. There was one event, don't know how many people remember a sighting over Colorado. Don't remember the guy's name. He ran a restaurant, was out with his daughter, and videotaped it. It was a little over a mile long. We got a report on that one. One of the analysts came down, ran real excited to me. He says, "Ron, we got a UFO." And the Air Force says it's a forest fire. So anyway, the local sheriff was notified there was a forest fire in his area, and he sent squads out. He couldn't find any forest fire at all. So
wow.
That was an interesting event.
Now, to me, what you're saying here sounds like scientific evidence that these things are happening.
Oh yeah,
and for me to understand that it just gets pushed to someone else's desk, and the people that need to know find out about it, and then it goes nowhere. It's frustrating to hear that.
Oh, yeah. It's frustrating to be a part of it.
I bet. So obviously, with what you just said a minute ago, at least some of your colleagues knew that you were interested in UFOs. So did you forcibly try to get anywhere with any of this, or is it just are you just held back by the bureaucracy of the whole thing?
I skated the edge of the classified world, and that what I mean is there's certain things that are classified, and justifiably so, I believe, especially back then more so than now, but for different reasons. But I knew what the limits were, and I went right up to the edge of the limits, and I didn't reveal any classified information. I still haven't, but it really makes the security personnel anxious. I was interviewed by Air Force Office of Special Investigations captain. You ready for a good laugh?
Yeah.
I had one. Captain James Kirk.
Okay. Yeah.
And he came in, he kicked the head of security out of his office and says, "We're going to need your office for about an hour." And came in and tried to debrief me. And I told him everything I told him. And he was just very flummoxed. The first thing he said, "I'm Captain James Kirk." And he said, "In civilian clothes." And I said, "Oh, yeah, right." And he ended up showing me his driver's license, his Air Force ID, and his credit card.
Oh, that's funny.
He had a good, he was a regular guy. He had a good sense of humor about it, and he took lots of notes, and I never got any flack from it. It was just, they have to check up on these things, and I'm glad they do. Mm-hmm. And another time I got a classified document sent to me. Sent to my home with Twix. Not a Twix. I can't remember the old-fashioned way when you send something over the phone lines on a piece of paper.
You mean a fax?
Yeah, fax. Uh-huh. Fax, thank you. I got a fax, and it had no classified markings, but I knew instantly what it was because I prepared the report that it had this sighting in it. I thought, damn it, where did this come from? So I'm 50-some-odd miles away from work. I worked in Azusa and lived in Huntington Beach. That's 53 miles one way. So I put it in a sealed envelope, put it under the mattress of my bed, and the next morning took it into the security office, and I said, "I received this classified document on a fax, and I want to report the person that sent it to me because we got a violation somewhere." Well, they didn't believe it because it didn't have any classification markings on it. So I had to take them down to the vault, show them the classified document from which it came, and there was that same page, but the page that I showed them in the vault had the classified markings on it. So there's a big folder all there. I was ordered to go home. I violated security because I didn't properly take care of it. Oh. A big investigation that day. I got back the next morning, and the security guard, when I walked in, he said, "What the hell did you do?" And I said, and I explained. He said, "Well, the guy was sent to investigate you. He's been fired."
Really?
And yeah, and I never did get to the bottom of it, but security left me alone from then on. I don't know what the hell went on.
Wow.
It was a bizarre series of events. Security was pretty tight.
Did this have anything to do with Hillary's email?
No. Didn't get involved in that.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, someone said on the message board, let me just pull that back up. They said it seems like you're saying the government is deliberately withholding this stuff by classifying it as secret. And what do you say?
No, it's the opposite. It's properly classified secret, therefore it is withheld. There's a difference. There's a difference, and that is there are some things that are properly classified. And,
well, let me just ask you this. Someone with an interest in UFOs like yourself, how do you feel about, let's just say, and I don't know if this is so or not, let's just say the Phoenix Lights incident, was recorded, scientifically recorded by this spy satellite, and it goes nowhere. Do you think that should be classified, or do you think that should...
Well,
go ahead.
To release the fact that we saw something isn't a scientific assessment that would enable anybody to have any credence put to it. For somebody to say, oh, you got a UFO, show me your data. Show me what it was radiant intensity was. Show me its time intensity profile. Show me the raw data that enabled you to determine this. And all those raw data are classified, and properly so, because it shows capabilities and limitations. And we don't want to reveal their capabilities and limitations. We can speak in generic, broad terms, but to make it scientifically provable, a scientist in the field would have to be able to look at the raw data come to the same conclusion. And those data are properly classified.
Well, just the fact that if you could note this loosely in tandem with all the witness reports of the sighting at the same time, I just think it's an added layer of authenticity that this happened. It's too bad, and I do understand what you're saying about all the classified aspects of the... Is it called the DSP, the Defense, whatever it was, program?
Defense Support Program. And that's still up there, still works. There's another successor to that, an evolutionary upgrade, if you will, that is the Space-Based Infrared System, or SBIRS. I wrote the performance design specifications for that system as well. There's a high orbit and a low orbit. The DSP is in what is called geosynchronous orbit, and that's 22,300 miles above the Earth. And it stays there the whole time. Satellites fall. If you imagine, if you will, you throw a rock, it goes 20 feet. Imagine if you throw a rock so hard it came back and hit you on the back of the head. Well, that would be what a satellite does. It falls at a rate, and so that if it falls at the same rate the Earth rotates, then it's in geo-Earth synchronicity. So it's a geosynchronous orbit.
Mm-hmm.
Another orbit is MOLNIA, MOLNIYA. That was discovered by the Soviets, and that's where the satellite is in an extremely high orbit and then comes down, whips around the Earth with great velocity, much closer to Earth, in the order of maybe 500 to 1,000 miles, and then whips back out to far distance. But all the time, it enables it to have a less predictable, more defensive capability. The satellites that are up there right now in geosynchronous orbit, your satellites for communication, your satellites for television, that's a beautiful place to put them, but it's so dang crowded up there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's making it difficult. So other orbits are being looked at and tried out to see how we can keep the coverage we want and need without running into another satellite. It's a real issue.
Yeah, another thing, do you, getting back to the question asked earlier by this emailer, the Star Wars defense program, there's been rumors whether that's going to exist. I guess that was back in Ronald Reagan's day when I first heard about it. Do you think something like that, if it's not in development, I know we're getting off topic, but I won't stay long on this, but if it's not in development currently, do you think that something like that will happen, where there will be a capability for us to, like, laser beam another country, or vice versa, they could to us, that type of thing, taking it up into the sky? Or has that been regulated so that is not supposed to happen?
It's pretty well self-regulated. The biggest problem we've got is funding. It's dang hard to get money. The government's broke. we're $19 trillion in debt. And so to get funding for programs is extremely difficult.
Yeah, but when it comes to defense, it seems like we have endless amounts of money to spend on any type of defense projects.
Well, the biggest problem we have is a lot of the defense money goes to sustain ongoing programs.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to close a bunch of bases and bring a bunch of people home, we'll use probably 1 billion gallons of fuel a day. I don't know the exact amount, but imagine all the airplanes, all the drones, all the tanks, all the ships, and it's just a fuel expense.
Yeah, big business.
It's a big business, but very little. When you check the budget, there's not too much going for research and development. Most of it's going to ongoing projects.
Okay, but if we got wind,
go ahead.
If we got wind that Russia was developing this, or another country, China or something like that, you would bet. I mean, I would bet that everything would be dropped and we'd be, trying to keep pace.
Depends on what they're developing. We can keep pace with the technology we have, with most of what they're doing, with what we've got. So if they had an emerging technology that would counter what we have, then yes, there would be a big phase to try to get that in so that we would have the upper hand. We've got some pretty good systems on board. But Star Wars was... our Space Defense Initiative, SDI, because the formal name of it, was defunded for the most part. It was a two-part system, and the part of detection was pretty well established, but the other part of it, what do you do when you see them? There was a need to shoot them down. The Israelis worked a lot on that and have a system, and theirs is in effect. We had a system we tried to get over into Crimea. That didn't work out too well. But we've got a modest system, but it's not anywhere nearly capable enough to do what Reagan envisioned with SDI. And one of the reasons is multiply targeted individual warheads, MIRVs. We could have as many as 20 of those, and if you shoot all 20 of them, well, you're going to waste a lot of stuff. And how do you shoot them? Well, you want to throw up a handful of rocks and let run into those. If you want to use a laser, well, lasers take a lot of power. And you're going to have 20 lasers? What if they launch 2 missiles with, now you've got 40 warheads to worry about? That means 40 lasers? So, I mean, the problem just grows astronomical. So then it becomes a system of, okay, let's see if we can differentiate which 1 or 2 or 3 of these independent missiles or warheads is real and which ones are phony.
I see.
So that's another sensing system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easier to sense them than it is to shoot all of them. And that's where... But other than the airborne laser, which is a chemical laser on board an aircraft, we didn't get much out of the shoot them down, but we got quite a bit out of the now you see them type of thing.
I see. So we're live with Ron Regir. If anyone wants to call in the show and ask Ron a question, that number is 603-967-4030. You're welcome to call in. You're also welcome to pose a question up in the chat room, either on Skype at PSN Radio or over at podcastufo.com. This same person was mentioning about, I'm sure you're familiar with the famous NASA shuttle footage that seems to show an object like moving off and zigzagging, moving off into space, and then it appears almost like missiles being shot at it. Now, this could be, I've heard, skeptics say that's ice particles. I have no idea what it is. I just wondered if you have looked at that footage.
No, I have. I've looked at the footage, and I, too, have no idea what it is. I do not buy the explanation that NASA offered that it was an ice particle that developed, the ice melted and let a pocket of compressed air escape. I mean, that's, boy, anybody that believes that, I'm going to sell them a bridge.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Now, this last year, I happened to go to Goddard Space Center and had a nice tour all through there. And it was really interesting. Now, what do you think about some of the footage? There's all types of rumors. I'm trying to remember Gary, his last name. He was a hacker that claimed that he saw different things before things were removed from footage and stuff like that. What do you think about all the talk that NASA will cut a feed to the International Space Station or something like that if an object is seen?
They might very well be doing that. I've heard those rumors as well, or heard those stories, and I can't say that they're not doing it, but NASA generally doesn't deal with that. The only thing that when I was working with NASA that was classified was the download frequency for the family communications. Because I didn't want people, every astronaut from the very first ones, I believe, had a special frequency they could call and talk to NASA medical staff, NASA psychological staff, and their families, so that they could have conversation with their families and not be eavesdropped on. That's the only thing I know that was ever classified by NASA. I worked with them for close to 20 years. They might very well have footage that they're not releasing, but there's no. Last time I checked, which was, I've been out of the business for a little over 15 years, but they had no provision for classifying documents or data. There wasn't any. Nobody that I knew, of all the time I worked with and all the meetings I attended, nobody had a security classification except for military personnel. So, it's can't help you there. I do know that there's been stuff that is probably suppressed or explained away with silly explanations, like the ice crystals that the astronauts saw, that they all said it was not ice crystals. They explain it more than they try to suppress it, and they give sometimes very, very poor explanations.
So
but if they were classifying it, you wouldn't see it. I'll guarantee you, if they were classifying it, you would not see it.
Right.
I mean, they do not release classified information.
Thanks to people in the chat room, that was Gary McKinnon, the person I was trying to think of.
Yes, that's right. That's right, Gary. He was the Brit who, I don't know if he ever got extradited to the U.S. or not. I know they were trying to extradite him over here.
As far as I know, not. And it was kind of interesting how he was able to hack that from a DSL-type line or something like that, and at his girlfriend's aunt's house or something. Yeah, the whole thing is bizarre, right?
It gets bizarre, or if you will. This is not Gary McKinnon, but during the Arab-Israeli war, remember when the Scud missiles were flying over, and we had a reporter named Wolf Blitzer?
Oh, yeah,
What a name for a war correspondent. Wolf Blitzer. It just sounds like that should be his job. But the mode of operation then was that our satellite would detect the launch of a Scud. We would detect that at Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado, out near Peterson Air Force Base. Then there would be a telephone call to the Pentagon. The Pentagon would get a yay or nay, almost always yay. They, in turn, would telephone call the area commander of a Patriot missile battery and give him the information he needed all handled by telephone calls, all handled on non-secure lines. We didn't have any secure lines that went from Cheyenne Mountain all the way to Israel, Tel Aviv, wherever. Since then, we've changed that, but that was our mode of operation there. That was in, 91?
Amazing.
Or whatever the first Gulf War was. Fascinating. It's scary in a way.
Yeah. This is probably going way off topic, and let's just keep it quick, but, I heard, you always hear, I really do believe that we landed on the moon, okay? So I'm not conspiratorial about that. A lot of people will argue, and a past guest just a couple of weeks ago was very adamant that he didn't think that we landed on the moon. But the technology, you think of 1969, July, when they first landed, there was all this like push button and computer. You were around then. How did that technology work so accurately? Was it all through mathematics that had to be manually done, or what? How did that work?
We had our computer that we used was enough to heat the entire facility. It generated that much heat. It was tube technology. Most, I would say, 95, maybe 98% of the Saturn and Apollo moon rocket was designed with slide rules, which probably none of your listeners under the age of 40 even knows what a slide rule is, and Freedom 9-key adding machine. That's what we use.
Wow.
And very little computers. We did get a computer that was reasonably good. It was an IBM 1620, and that was took hollerith cards, the punch cards. We were really excited when they came out with formula translation software, which became known as Fortran. And we were able to, well, I'll give you an incident. We would use fuel flow calculations to determine engine cutoff, thrust vectors, things like that. And so we would do that with slide rules. And with slide rules, if you're really good, you can get maybe 2 decimal place accuracy on them. I mean, if you're really good. And so we got this computer, and it gave us 9 decimal places. Well, that's in the insane.
Wow.
But we got the data, so we reported it to NASA, and our NASA contracting officer, Homer Jones, nice guy, he looks at that and he says, "What do you guys do when you want to get real accurate?"
Wow.
So we went back to 2 decimal place accuracy. It was good. It got us there back, but it was fun times. We were serious. We didn't allow failures. I think that the term was failure is not an option, and it wasn't.
I can't remember if it was this country or what country it was that had. You talked very early in the program about failed launches, and I heard. I'm trying to remember what country it was trying to put a probe on the moon, and they had countless failed launches. Do you know what? Was it us?
Yeah, we had quite a few failures, and the reason was we miscalculated the mass of the moon. The other thing we had problems with is we didn't know if we would encounter. There were some very reputable scientists who said it's going to have 3, 4, 5 foot of fine dust, the result of millions of years of micrometeoroid impacts, just creating all this dust and nothing to blow it away. And there wasn't that much dust. It was, when you look at the dust, talk to the astronauts, it was a clayey type of dust. It would stick to things.
Right.
And that's because it had a static charge, and everything on Earth gets a static charge, but it gets discharged. We got enough air molecules moving around, and that discharges all these charges. Everything sort of balances out and works pretty good. But in space, there's no mechanism for grounding. Satellites, the way we clean our satellites is We have a positive ground, and then all of the space junk, the dust, comes around and accumulates on the radiators so that we start getting warmer and warmer and warmer. Starts collecting on the solar panels so we don't have as much power generation. And so what we have to do then is reverse the polarity of the electronics and simultaneously fire the reactive control system motors and move the satellite over about 10 feet. So it leaves a cloud of dust about 10 feet away, and then everything goes back to normal until the next time we see performance degrading. So we scoot it back to another position. So there's a lot of little nuances that go on with these things.
I bet. I can't. Someone just posted up on the message board, and I've heard similar things to this, that the Apollo 11 that landed on the moon was using a computer 1,300 times less powerful than your iPhone, which is...
I don't know the calculation, but it was much... A Trash 80 would have been a powerful computer. They didn't...
Right.
I don't know that, I can't quantify and say 1,300 times, but I wouldn't be a bit surprised.
Yeah. And I've heard, along those lines where Voyager 1 has about as much computer power as your key fob on your car.
That's probably very close to the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. And the one thing, since I know this is that's not exactly a satellite, but how does I think that's traveling now at like 35,000 miles an hour or something like that. How it was probably through like a ricochet around a planet or something like that. Is that the only way that you can get up to speed like that when you're traveling through space?
Yeah, and once you get, as we get further and further away from the gravitational effects of our sun, and the planets become the major contributor, and we slingshot around those. And then when we get into deep space, we just kind of coast. There's nothing to slow you down. And so it's, the gravitational effects of faraway planets become minuscule, but they're still there. They're always there. We just can't really measure them. But, it's mainly slingshooting off the planets and then going into deeper space.
I think I said ricochet. I meant slingshot. Okay, so since you're a man of science and your technical involvement and all of that, and you have a fascination with UFOs, how do you think, the question you always hear from skeptics is, it's impossible to get here from another solar system, star system. Takes too much energy, takes too much time. What do you think about those statements?
I think they're displaying large degree of ignorance. Right now, what we're doing is throwing rocks. No matter how you want to look at it, we're throwing rocks and either using our arm muscles, or we go into extending that by making an atlatl, or we extend it by making a slingshot, or we extend it by making a rocket. So those are all evolutionary transitions. In other words, it evolves from one step to the next. What we will see soon will be a revolutionary, doing something other than throwing rocks. And one of those evolutionary processes was described by Bob Lazar when he came in and said what they're doing is folding space. They look at an area of space and fold it over much as you would a sheet of paper, bringing one corner to you next to you, and then just transferring to the other corner, and then unfolding it, and you traverse the entire length of the page. So that would be a revolutionary step that would enable us to traverse great distances.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Bob's name, and I have a question I'm going to I'll hang on to for right now up on the message board from Matthew. But so Bob Lazar, you got to know Lear, John Lear, and then Bob Lazar, and I personally I'm on the fence about Bob, and so I want to know. I want to talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
So, do you think that Bob's story was legitimate?
Yes.
You do? Okay.
I met Bob before he worked at Area 51S4. And he was not just a skeptic, he was a debunker. You know, John, you guys are full of crap. And, I mean, he was a debunker. You know, scientifically, there's no way they can do this. There's no way they can do that. I'm a scientist. There's no, you know, you guys are full of it. And the week after he started working there, he came in and he was sort of ashen-faced and very apologetic. And he said, you know, shook his head. He says, you guys are right. He says, worse than that. He says, you guys don't even know the story. So, yeah, he either did what he said he did or had some exceedingly strong psychotropic drugs that he was totally unaware of that were able to change his entire affect, and it's lasted for almost 30 years. So however you want to play that is okay with me. Well, I'm convinced that it was something he personally worked with and personally witnessed, and it's not the result of a continuing 30-year long-lasting psychotropic drugs. I don't see that happen.
You know, it's just the question is, you know, the education and the fact that he didn't know a landmark right outside of MIT. And, you know, there's just been, when a story falls apart, you look for all the loose ends. And there was a lot of loose ends when it comes to him.
Oh, yeah. No question about it. I mean, we've seen more of Bob Lazar's transcripts than we have Barack Obama's. I mean, and I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just saying that there are some things that are very difficult to, and it should be very easy to determine. How many classmates did he have? What was the professor's name? I never got involved with that because I believed the man when I heard him and I saw him with my own eyes. I saw the way he behaved. So it didn't. I didn't feel any need to work one way or the other to prove or disprove what he was saying or not saying.
Well, you know, I think I look at George Knapp. Now, I have a lot of respect for George Knapp. As a matter of fact, I think he is probably one of the best people on the radio that dives into this topic. And he, and a very honest and level-headed person, and he basically stands behind Bob Lazar. Maybe there's two things that could be happening. One is maybe Bob Lazar can really sell himself to people, and he and he's not being straight with everyone, or the fact that you know, maybe there is something to this. I like to be open-minded. I just have, like I said, I've been on the fence about Bob because of all the different things that has come forth.
Yeah, I understand, and like I say, I base it on my personal knowledge of knowing him, and everything else says, yeah, that's the only comparison I can make is we've got a president we know less about than we do about Bob Lazar. So whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to get...
Bob's been to my house twice. You know, after, he doesn't want to talk about it. It's just not. He has. How many books do you think he's written about it?
Yeah, none.
None. So he's made zero. He's got nothing but heartache from this. I would think if he was attempting to exploit it, he would have at least attempted to get back a little bit. But he hasn't done that. that's another, to me, the personal knowledge and the fact that he hasn't tried to exploit it are two strong indicators that he's telling the truth. But he's just given up. He doesn't care anymore.
Yeah.
He's moved on to other things.
Yeah, yeah. I was out in...
I think was at Alejandro's conference down in Scottsdale.
Yeah. I was out there, but I unfortunately that year I had to leave early, so I missed that whole thing. And I was hoping that there would be a questions after, and I wanted to see that tape, but I guess he was scooted off right after that. But let's get back to you have a question that came up on the message board, and our guest, meaning you touched on the Iranian UFO at the beginning of the show. Can you elaborate on the specifics, like, for instance, what we knew, why it didn't get shared with everyone? Is it because of the classified implications of it?
Yeah, it was classified by the Defense Intelligence Agency. What I got was... we call it the itty-bitty individual target event database, which showed all of the events of the, I forget, 30 days, I think. Anyway, it was of a certain period of time. In the midst of that report was the exact, precise date, time, latitude, and longitude of the Iranian UFO. And the cryptic comment was 76 scans, possible SR. And SR is a classified term. I can't tell you what it means, but that was an unclassified correlation of that event. So that's all I can tell you about it. That was what led me to it. I talked to several people, but the DIA classified it. I presented at the, I forget which MUFON symposium. I won the award for the best case analysis of the year, and that was the report on the Iranian UFO.
Wow.
So that should be available, a video available from MUFON. I haven't ever seen it because I was there. But,
well...
But I'm sure you could get it from MUFON. There's present a lot more information about it.
For that case, I'm sure most of the listeners are aware of that case. But for the one that isn't, that happened in 1976, and there were jets that were scrambled. The military was scrambled, and there was you know the details. I think some equipment failed or something when they were.
Yeah.
Go ahead. If you would.
There was first scrambled an Iranian Imperial Air Force F-4, which was a first-line fighter then. We were on good terms with the Shah of Iran. We provided him with our frontline weapon systems, and the F-4 Phantom jet was one of those frontline fighters. And as the F-4 turned and achieved radar lock, they would lock on with radar to get their missiles to hit the target. And as soon as they got the target and were holding it with radar, that's called radar lock, and as soon as they achieved radar lock, every bit of electronics equipment in the F-4 failed instantly and simultaneously. As soon as the F-4 no longer posed a threat, in other words, it started falling out of the sky, the electronics came back on. So they thought they had a faulty aircraft. They launched the second F-4. And that F-4 went up and encountered the UFO, same problems. Not just once, but 3 or 4 times with each aircraft. That lock onto this right target, and the target split into several ones. Now, this is not an isolated event at 3 o'clock in the morning. This was about 10 o'clock at night. The jets were flying supersonics in a city of several million people. Sonic booms are going all over the town, breaking windows. People are, maybe as many as 2 million people witnessed this event. So it's not something that was kept secret. It was widely known that the UFO, or light, bright light that was causing all this trouble, split into 2 and disappeared over a ridge. The next morning, the Imperial Iranian Air Force sent a helicopter out, and they could find no evidence of it, but they did get reports from the people that, yes, something had come in there and either landed or crashed, depending on the witness observers. At the same time, all this was happening, an airline was approaching from Europe, flying to Iran. The airline pilot was blinded by this light. The amount of time light blindness can persist is normally about a minute max. Well, he was night blinded for over 5 minutes flying a passenger craft. And it fascinated the entire scenario. But it was all reported in Tehran. It was this UFO was seen over Cairo, Egypt, and there's not very many points in between. But 4 airliners spotted it. It was a big event. So it wasn't suppressed at all. It got Bob Pratt, who was then a reporter for the National Enquirer when the National Enquirer had a great deal of credibility, wrote a great deal about it. It was, but again, this is 40 years ago.
Right.
So, memories fade, and all of a sudden these papers that described it they're available out there on the archives. And like I say, I presented quite a few of them at the MUFON Symposium. And I think Bob Pratt's papers and Bruce McAbee's analysis are also available on the MUFON website. So anybody that's interested in this case could get a lot of data from just the MUFON website on this.
Right. I'm trying to remember the military personnel, that the gentleman that was involved and spoke on that. Do you know who he is?
Well, I do. He was a captain. I've spoken to him. I talked to him and shook hands with him, had a picture taken with him, and I'm not remembering his name.
Me neither. But, he was on our show briefly, and I met him.
But the head of the Imperial Iranian Air Force, it's like our Secretary of the Air Force was there watching the whole thing. I mean,
really? I didn't know. Yeah,
this was a big deal. I gave one presentation on it, and I had a gentleman in the audience who lived in Tehran at the time, and he said where he was standing, he lived on a hill slightly above. Tehran's a hilly town, and he said he lived on one of the higher hills, and he said you could see hundreds of people with flashlights and everything else out there looking at this thing. It was a maybe 1 million, 2 million people heard it and saw it. It was just unheard of. He was shocked that very few people here knew about it.
Right. It really is. It's one of those amazing cases. And what, in your experience with your background, what would make equipment fail? Would it be electromagnetics or something? Am I even saying that right?
Make them fail with an electromagnetic pulse, but we can't turn them back on. Turning them off is easy, but turning them back on, we can't do that. So I don't know what the modality was to turn it back on. I know that, like I say, we can turn them off, and that's one of the real threats we as a nation face. That's because all the power lines and all the railroad tracks all become great big conductors that could take an EMP pulse out and destroy things. So,
yeah, there are a lot of cases where electronics fail and then start again. I actually heard an account directly from someone that experienced not even into UFOs, but totally told a story. And I've said this story before in the show, but we have a lot of new listeners, so I'll say it quickly. He was in a mountain pass, and all of a sudden his car stopped, just died, and so did everyone else's car. And people were out there lifting the hood. Everyone was rolled over to the side as far as it could, and everyone was out lifting their hood, trying to check what's going on. And all of a sudden this big cigar-shaped craft floated without a sound right through the mountain pass, right over their head. It had portholes, which I think is another added amazing thing. And it passed through. They're all looking at it, and everyone's, going, oh, making noises and all that. It goes through. Then a guy gets in his car, tries the key again. The thing starts right up. Everyone's car started right up again. What can do that? And why did it happen?
Not that we have, unless they've developed it in the past few years.
Right.
And I doubt it, because in the past, every time we've had a weapon system, we've used it. Every time we've had an advanced technology, we use it in war. And, I don't think we have that because we haven't used it. So,
well, you just touched on something that is of great interest to me, even though I've talked about it fairly recently. I had Christopher Mellon, who was interviewed by the Huffington Post, Leslie Kane, a while back. He was on the show a few weeks ago. And so if there is technology out there, you just said, we'd be using it. And that does make sense. And a lot of people are saying these triangle craft that are, floating at 40 knots overhead, no sound. A lot of people saying it's some type of experimental military. But it goes back for many years that people are seeing these type of things. What do you say to the person that is saying it has to be military?
Show me some evidence.
Yeah.
Same as I do on everything else. Show me some evidence. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying until we have evidence, your speculation and my speculation are equally valid. We need evidence. And I can't say you're wrong. I can't say you're right. It's interesting. I think Stanton Friedman calls it his gray basket. That goes in the gray basket.
Yeah.
And until we have evidence, I work on evidence. Those are nice. There's lots of nice stories out. Just the one you just told. It's a nice story. It goes in the gray basket. As soon as we have something that we can use as evidence for that, eyewitness testimony is a type of evidence. I'll grant that every day. When we get 2 eyewitnesses, that's better. 3 eyewitnesses, that's better yet. And then we start talking about how long was it out, what kind of car did you have, was it a modern car where everything is computer controlled, did anybody have a diesel truck that doesn't have an electronic ignition system, did that shut down? Why would that shut down? There's a lot of things we could ask, a lot of questions we can ask to determine what was going on to gather some more evidence, and that's what we need to do before we can quantitatively state it was a UFO. And it could have been some kind of mass hysteria or something. Hysteria doesn't have to be crazy people running around shouting and waving their arms. So I don't know. It's in my gray basket.
Right.
So
yeah.
Figure it out. We'll give an answer.
What do you think? I'd like to hear different people's opinion on this, but what do you think we would need for enough evidence to show or to get science interested in the fact of exploring the possibility that we are being visited from, let's say, extraterrestrials? I'll go out and say that. I'm not saying. I always get a lot of email if I say something like that. So, but I'm just saying, what would it take for evidence to make science interested in this?
Oh, I think it depends on the scientist. I don't know if you want to call me a scientist or not, but I'm interested. And I don't mean that as a flip response. I think you mean essentially, and I apologize for putting words in your mouth. Mainstream science studying it as the same way they do archaeology, anthropology, carpentry, building bridges. There's this certain place where science just accepts it and uses it or goes on with it. And I call that mainstream science. To get them interested, you have to have some. I think the first thing is to get the crazies out of the business. You've got hundreds of fake UFOs and people screaming this and that. It detracts from it.
It does. It's not going to get any better either with drones. We had someone posting up on the message board earlier that you can buy, illuminated drones now for $15 or $20.
Yeah.
It's not going to get any better.
Yeah, and you can fly a nightstick in a plastic bag suspended underneath your drone.
Yeah.
And they could do all kinds of things. And there's various people have various motives for putting hoaxes out. Sincere people see things that they can't explain, and the label UFO is intended to it. Well, yeah, unidentified. Yeah, it's in the air, so it's flying. Yeah, it was an object. So it's difficult. I think the first thing is we in the UFO community, have to be a lot more stringent in our procedures, our methods, our way of evaluating these things, the way we investigate it. That's why I support MUFON. They're trying to do a credible job, and they still get a few nut jobs in there.
Yes,
nut jobs and say super enthusiastic people who have lesser degree of judgment.
Yeah.
So
we just had
yeah.
Earlier in the Skype chat room over at PSN Radio, someone wrote that they're a new MUFON investigator, and we were going back and forth in a conversation. One of the things during the news we talked about a case was being closed. This person was talking about that too, how they seem to close cases quickly. And what are your thoughts on that? As unknown or whatever, but it seems pretty quick.
Yeah, it's very seldom do we get much data. Quite frequently, the data are sketchy. I had a case where a college professor and a student were in their houses. They could hear automatic weapons fire off in the distance. This is at night. They were in their houses. They had something bright, so bright it was and noisy and just earth-shattering that it was shaking. They could see dust filtering down and light shining through cracks on this object. It was overhead. Wow. And then the object disappeared. It went away. And went outside, and one of the neighbors was fighting with something, and a small something, like 3 foot tall, 4 foot tall child, but there were no children in the area. And then the next day, a black vehicle came up and went to the backyard and brought out an ice chest that would readily have held a 3 or 4 foot tall child, took it off, and the neighbor bought a new pickup truck and had plenty of money and plenty of booze for the next couple of months. What was that all about? Well, investigating, they never found any reports other than that 2 people of anything happening. We couldn't find any spent cartridges, and when aircraft with guns, which are very few of them anymore, engage, they eject the cartridges into the air and they fall to the ground. So if there's a lot of automatic weapons fire, you're going to find spent cartridges. We didn't find any. That doesn't mean they aren't there. We didn't find any. We did find footprints that were quite large, which possibly maybe there was a Bigfoot out there, but that didn't fit any of the witness accounts. And the neighbor did have a brand new pickup truck, and he was drunker than a skunk and unfit for interview. So where do you go after that? What would you do? Where do you there are no more witnesses. There's nobody around who can be a witness. There was no police activity, no police reports. This is out in the country, very, very remote area. Where do you go? What do you do with it?
Right.
What would you do with it? You write up the facts. Well, I did. Wrote up the facts, and that was the end of it. Unknown.
We only have about 3 minutes left, and I had a couple of questions. I'm going to try to, if you can just give a real quick, short answer. Let's see. Bobby wanted to know, did you ever work on Vela satellites? VELA, however you pronounce it.
No, that was a predecessor to DSP. That was the old one. No, never worked on that.
That was a quick one. All right, and another one is totally unrelated, but Shane wants to know what your thoughts of the F-35 were. And he just said that he doesn't often get a chance to talk to an aerospace engineer.
You talk about the news strike reconnaissance fighter. It's a piece of junk.
Well, that's a good answer. Okay. Yeah.
It's overpriced, underperforms.
Wow. Yeah. Someone's probably making a little trunk money on that one, as they say in the car business. All right. Well, can you tell the listener, if they're interested in contacting you, you don't have a website, right?
I do not have a website. I do not have a book for sale yet. I do have a DVD of flute music and petroglyphs.
You know, I said we could talk about that, and you know, I apologize. We ran out of time. So that's your fascination right now, is the petroglyphs that have a lot of interesting beings and also orbs and saucer-like things. Just real quickly, because we only have 2 minutes or less, are you going to continue along that path and try to discover more of these in your territory out there?
Yes, I am. And right now we're looking at, my wife and I, she goes out with me. She's top hand, just perfect companion. And we go out and look for these things. And I've found three petroglyphs and one pictograph so far that accurately depict ancient legends. And it's just a nice hobby. And then I have a very good friend who I'm sure most of your audience has seen on Ancient Aliens, that Clifford Mahoney.
Uh-huh.
He's a good fight. And then I have a Navajo friend and a Hopi friend. And so we correlate and find out, what's going on. So it's. Are you
planning to write a book about this, or is this just a hobby?
I'll write a book just so it's documented. But I've got it's a hobby, but I don't plan on making it. I'd like to make a lot of money, but it's not something that's going to make me wealthy.
All right. Well, hey, thanks so much. And listeners out there, you can, if you go to the show notes on Podcast UFO, you will see how to get a hold of our great guest this evening, Ron Regehr. Thanks so much, Ron.
Anytime.
All right. Yeah, I may want to have you back on again. We'll talk about that later. All right, everyone. So that's it for our show this evening. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week, and Alejandro Rojas and I will be doing the entire show together. For those of you that like to hear us do the news every week, you might enjoy it. Some people may not like it at all. You can skip a week if you have to. But anyway, we'll be back, and thanks so much. A couple of thanks out there to Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse and Bruce Rainier for our music, and Keith Rowland for putting us on the Dark Matter Digital Network, and also Angel for over at PSN Radio. Thanks a lot, and we'll be back next week. Keep your eyes to the sky.